What should we do as YouTubers if we can't stand the sound of our own voice? People often hold very critical views of themselves, whether it's warranted or not. Hey there, I'm Paige Turner. Welcome to the channel. When I first started posting on YouTube, I was terrified. Part of this is because I am not Instagram model beautiful. And I'm certainly not perfect when speaking on camera. People who look and sound like me weren't on TV when I was growing up. And so I felt really weird doing this. In particular, it made it really hard to video edit because I hated looking at myself and I hated listening to the sound of my own voice. But I'm happy to say that I got over that. Let's talk about how. So I'll go into some strategies you can use later on in the video. But first, I want to tell you some really important truths. This is a biggie. Listen carefully. Your voice is good enough. Okay, I know you hate the sound of your own voice. I did too, but your voice is good enough. Seriously, for the vast majority of people, your voice is good enough. If I can understand what you say, your voice is good enough. You might be arguing with me on this. You might be like, no, I have a horrible voice. I hate the sound of it. And I would have argued too. But here's the thing. The vast majority of people also hate the sound of their voice. Why is that? Well, there are several reasons. The first is due to the difference between bone conduction versus air conduction. So what does that mean? When you're speaking, your voice not only vibrates through the air, which is called air conduction, but it also vibrates through your skull, which is a phenomenon called bone conduction. So bone conduction is interesting because it tends to emphasize lower frequencies. And what this does is it makes your voice sound deeper and richer to you. And then when it's played back on a recording, it doesn't sound the same because that's just the air conduction component. And that component on the recording will sound thinner and higher than what you heard in your head. And this difference leads to the next reason why we hate the sound of our own voice, and that's because it is unfamiliar. That lack of lower sound frequencies leads to your voice sounding unfamiliar. And not just unfamiliar, but it's close but no cigar. So one thing about human beings is if something is close but a little off, it is extremely unsettling. It's similar to the Uncanny Valley effect, where you have something like a mannequin or something that's supposed to look human, but it's not quite right, and it really creeps people out. It's that uncanny valley. Listening to your voice on a recording is in that same range. But it's not only that, it's also some element in most individuals of self-criticism. People often hold very critical views of themselves, whether it's warranted or not. And this includes their voice. When you listen to your voice, it might reveal quirks that you don't necessarily normally know about. And those quirks might hit you as flaws, and it could turn into this whole thing where you're just very self-conscious about it, where somebody else would find it charming. So that's your voice, right? It's unsettling, it's hard to listen to. And then of course, when you're doing video editing, it's not just about how you sound, it's also about how you look, because there's this whole video in front of you. And I could spend a whole video talking about body image. Frankly, I could do a whole series. I could do a whole channel on feeling better about how you look and about the way that society causes us to criticize ourselves visually and never feel good enough. But briefly and specifically pertaining to YouTube, here's something that was very helpful for me to realize. They've done studies, and you don't actually have to be conventionally attractive for people to click on your thumbnails and to watch your videos. It's common knowledge that having a face on your thumbnail is a good idea on YouTube most of the time because it ups click-through rate. However, and this is important, it doesn't matter how attractive the face is, how young or how old the face is. It's just about having a face on your thumbnail. So why would that work then? Well, the bump in click-through rate is believed to be because we actually have specialized areas of our brain completely devoted to visually processing faces. In particular, the fusiform faces area in the fusiform gyrus, which is part of the temporal lobe. Anyway, our brains find human faces very attention-getting, and most of a thumbnail's initial job is to attract our eye and get us to stop scrolling or scanning. And literally any face helps with that. Doesn't need to be a conventionally attractive one. Besides, being flawed is cool right now. I'm not kidding. Authenticity is the new hot YouTube trend. There's some big YouTubers that have done videos on this. I'll link one below that I found really interesting about people holding lavaliers and what that meant about authenticity and trends on YouTube. But quickly, the reason why is that there's this growing frustration both with AI and kind of the fakeness and weirdness of that, and a desire to get away from the corporate latecomers that came on YouTube and are advertising their wares. And the funny thing is that even they are emulating indie style and flawed, authentic delivery versus the idea that everything has to be polished as possible. Authenticity is cool, it's hip, it's endearing, it's relatable, and people like it. And finally, this is the last big truth that was really helpful for me to learn as a presenter in general, but also it applies to YouTube because you're presenting in front of a camera. People can't tell how nervous you are. They've done studies. Somebody will be up there and they'll be really, really nervous, and they'll rate their own level of nervousness and anxiety delivering a presentation. And then they will poll the audience afterwards and ask how nervous the presenter seemed. And without fail, the audience always ranks the presenter lower on nervousness and anxiety than what the presenter felt. So this illusion of transparency is this feeling we have that we're like, oh gosh, I'm feeling awkward, I'm feeling cringe, they're gonna see it, they're gonna hate the video, it's gonna go terrible, they're gonna be able to tell, oh gosh, nobody's gonna watch it. It's not true. They can't tell you're nervous if you're nervous. The magic of video editing adds another layer. So if you're super crazy, if you're super out there, you can always clip that part out, or you can keep it in. Sometimes it's fun. We were just talking about flaws and relatability. But I've had times where I was nervous talking about something and I can still see it in my footage. And I've gone and I've edited the video and I put it up anyway, and I've gotten comments about how confident I am on camera. Like, seriously, like, look at this. I am not confident. I wasn't confident in that video. So just something to keep in mind, that your experience of what you see and hear as you're editing your video isn't going to be the same as the viewers. And sometimes that's for the better. Okay, so those are the truths. Now let's talk strategies. What should we do as YouTubers if we can't stand the sound of our own voice? So before I go into these, I want to be clear that I'm not advocating for all of these. And I want to be clear that the first two aren't something I've personally chosen to do, but I wanted to present you some options. Okay, so the first strategy is pretty straightforward, and that is don't edit your videos. Now, I obviously edit mine, and most videos do benefit from at least basic edits, like ripple cuts for clarity, B-roll and overlays for demonstrative purposes. But to be fair, there are some really successful YouTubers that do in fact shoot in one view and seemingly one take. Immediately, Big Clive and the Lockpicking Lawyer spring to mind. I'll link their channels below so you can check them out if you're not familiar with them. They demonstrate that you technically don't need to edit your videos. Although, to be fair, like I was saying, most successful channels actually do at least basic edits, and I clearly edit mine. Now, the second option is that you can hire an editor to edit your videos for you. That said, this normally costs money unless you have someone else in your life who's willing to do it for you. So, for example, this isn't my only YouTube channel. I have this channel, the Page Turner channel, and I also have a channel called Our Moving Castle, which is a travel channel about RVing that I run with my husband, Justin. Justin and I are co-hosts of the channel. We both appear on screen. Now, Justin can't stand to watch himself on video. He can't even watch finished videos after they're done. Justin actually doesn't even like seeing photos of himself. He's very self-conscious. But that situation works out fine because Justin doesn't have to. I edit that channel as well. I edit everything. So that's been delegated to me. And that's a situation where Justin has that feeling and he can still put out YouTube videos, at least as a co-host, because I do all the video editing. Now that's kind of an odd situation. In most situations, you wouldn't have that. You'd have to hire somebody and that costs money. And if you're a small channel that isn't monetized, it can be a big ask to pay an editor with no money coming in. For me, that seems like something you do after you have a stream coming in and you're trying to speed yourself up so you can make more videos or make videos that are better in a different way. Seems like a difficult thing to pay for video editing in the beginning. That said, I do know some people who have done that and who swear by it, although most of them also emphasize that it's important, even if you're hiring someone, that you actually know how to video edit a little bit yourself first. And that way you can communicate better with the person that's going to be editing your videos. You can tell them what you want in a way that makes more sense, kind of like like how musicians talk to each other a little bit more specifically and efficiently. That way, if you're working and you've hired an editor, they will deliver a better edit, they'll do it faster, and usually this also means cheaper, especially if they're charging by the hour. Now, like I was saying, I personally would consider outsourcing video editing, but for me, it would be something I do eventually after I've been monetized for a while. My first channel just got monetized. I'm not at that point where it makes financial sense for me to do that. And for me, it would have to make sense from a financial and an efficiency perspective. But it is a way of getting around the difficulty of hearing yourself and seeing yourself on camera. It's not what I've chosen. All right, so those are the two options I didn't choose. Now let's get down to the one that I did choose and the one that I advocate the most strongly for, and that is exposure therapy. Just doing it and soldiering on until you get used to it. And I promise you will, month by month. When I started, I hated it. I was cringing every time I'd sit down to video edit. Part of that was that I didn't know what I was doing and there was so much to learn and it was so hard to figure it all out. I'm not a visual learner. I actually have a condition called aphantasia, which I'll talk about in a later video, but I have no visual imagination. Video editing was not intuitive for me. I don't have a mind's eye. It was a lot of trial and error until I figured out things that worked. And the fact that I hated what I sounded like and what I looked like on camera was not helping one bit. There were mornings where I sat down and I was physically forcing myself to edit, and I felt like I was going to be sick to my stomach, but I got over it. It wasn't all at once. It got a little less annoying as time went on. It was horrible the first week. Maybe it was 1% better the second week and 1% better than that the third week. And then maybe a month in, I had like a 10% reduction. It went kind of like that. And then one day I woke up about 6 months into running our moving castle and doing that video editing. And I wasn't dreading editing the videos. I was actually excited to make the video. I was excited to sit down and video edit, and my own voice didn't bother me one bit. Not one bit. So I can promise you it goes away if you're persistent. You will not feel bad about it forever. And like, I felt like I was gonna lose my lunch when I first sat down. I was shaking. I felt horrible. So if you can go from that to feeling excited to video edit, you just keep exposing yourself to it until you stop feeling bad about it. It will happen. You'll get used to it, I promise. Anyway, other than not editing at all or hiring an editor to do it for you, the only way around the cringe is through it. And please, remember everything I said at the beginning. You sound fine, you look fine, you can do this. It won't be cringe forever. I believe in you. Anyway, it was great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.